President Putin made a surprise visit to Syria to announce the withdrawal of Russian forces from that country. His trip came as a stopover between meetings with President Erdogan in Turkey and also President el-Sisi of Egypt. Putin declared victory in the war against ISIS and said Russian troops stood ready to confront ISIS should the forces reappear in the country. Meanwhile, the United States-led coalition has claimed responsibility for victory against ISIS in Syria. For more on all of this, we go to John Sitilides, geopolitical expert, with us tonight. John, your thoughts on this? This is almost like a tug-of-war for credibility and credit here. How do you read it?
I think you're right. There are several different dimensions to this, and I think the timing is very interesting, Ed. Coming right after the Iraqi leadership claimed victory over Islamic State in northern Iraq. Now you have the U.S.-led forces that are decimating Islamic State in eastern Syria. So I think it was very smart from Putin's perspective to try to claim credit for defeating Islamic State in the country, although most of his forces have really been focused on the anti-Assad forces to make sure that Assad remains the strong man in Damascus, more so than against Islamic State.
Do you think Russia will withdraw all of its troops from Syria?
No, I don't. As a matter of fact, Putin made very clear it's not so much a withdrawal from the country, it's a withdrawal from the battlefield. These forces will mostly be repositioned to the major naval facility in Tartus and the major new air base in Latakia that Russia will now have on lease for about the next 99 years from the Syrian government.
Why all of a sudden the United States claiming that they really had the upper hand in getting rid of ISIS?
I think it's factual. If you look at what's been happening in eastern Syria, arming the Kurdish forces there that have really been the effective ground force against Islamic State, while the U.S.-led coalition provides the bombing, the air campaign against that terrorist force. But there really have been so many different battles throughout the Syrian battlefield that Russia really has focused on western Syria and the U.S.-led forces in the eastern part of the country.
Would you give analysis to the United States and Turkey as the relationship is fragile? Is that fair?
To say the least.
To say the least. Okay.
I would call it fraying.
Pardon me?
Fraying.
Okay, it's fraying. How would you describe it with Russia and Turkey?
I think it depends on the issue. I don't think there's any great strategic plan between the Russians and the Turks. Remember, these are historical enemies. They have gone to war many times as the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire for centuries. And in that part of the world, they don't forget what happened in the 1700s and 1800s. I think there were going to be some very important energy ties. I think the issue in Syria is going to be very, very careful to watch here, Ed, because Turkey is still opposed to Assad remaining in power. And Russia, of course, wants to keep Assad in power as long as he will allow the Russians to maintain their facilities there. The real issue is Iran. What are Iran's designs in Syria, and will they be backed by the Russians to the extent that the Iranians seek to, or do the Russians have other plans that don't necessarily include Iran in the next 1 to 2 years?
All right, let's talk about Assad. What's his future as you see it, and what's it depend on?
Depends on the Russians and the Iranians to a certain extent, but I think the Russians really have established themselves as the major outside player now in Syrian politics. They're going to be convening the Iranians and the Turks in Kazakhstan for the political settlement process. But I think Assad's going to be in power for quite some time, certainly longer than Washington would want him to be.
And this move, the United States endorsing the moving of the capital to Jerusalem, how does that play into the big picture in the Middle East?
I don't think it does. The countries that used to be opposed to this potentiality are now more concerned about allying themselves with Israel, stealthily, against the Iranian threat. All of the Sunni countries in the area are far more concerned about Iran than they are about the well-being of the Palestinians. And one might say they've actually exploited the Palestinian situation for domestic political purposes.
And quickly back to Syria, will the United States continue to have the policy of Assad must go and just say it, but not do anything about it?
I don't think so. I think that was mostly an Obama policy, and President Trump has made very clear he's simply not going to put all of his eggs in the Assad basket.
John Sitilides, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us. Thanks so much.